This is Dan of Vagabond Buddha. I'm going to show you pictures of Guanajuato, Oaxaca, and Queretaro, Mexico, as I explain why I have rated them the top 3 places to retire in Mexico. But don't write anything down. All of the links I mention and the text of this video are on Vagabond Buddha. Just click the link in the notes below this YouTube video to find this text and links for this post. I recently completed a tour of Mexico. On the tour, we visited the top 20 places that Americans retire in Mexico. I'm not just an author, I went to these places. The goal of the tour was to find the best place to retire in Mexico. There's some really amazing places in Mexico, so it's not that easy to pick where to retire. In fact, I wrote 3 different blog posts ranking the best places to retire in Mexico. I ranked the best places based upon the personality of the person retiring. We are not all alike. The 3 categories were best places for cultural explorers, for active adventurers, and for rural self-reliance. Since I'm a cultural explorer, I found myself most attracted to the colonial era cities in the mountains of Mexico. Towns were built in the mountains during the colonial period. Air conditioning had not been invented yet, so very few large cities developed at sea level during the colonial period. It was just too hot in most parts of Mexico. You see, these cities like Guanajuato, Queretaro, and Oaxaca were the most interesting to me. They were rich in culture because their city centers were built all the way back in the 1500s. Additionally, all 3 have rich pre-Hispanic culture, and their colonial era centers have been protected and restored. So why not Chapala, Ajijic, or San Miguel de Allende? I've received email from people asking me why these 2 spots are not in my top 3 places to live in Mexico. People assume that most Americans will want to move there because of the high concentration of expats. I agree that both of these expat heavens are very charming places in Mexico, but they didn't feel Mexican enough for me. I grew up in California in the Central Valley with many Mexican-American friends. I love the Mexican-American culture in California, but now I wanted a mostly Mexican experience in Mexico, whereas Chapala, Ajijic, and San Miguel de Allende felt like Mexican communities serving Americans and Canadians, whereas places like Guanajuato, Queretaro, or Oaxaca felt more like Mexican-centric cultures catering to Mexicans. You get more of a Mexican experience than an integration experience. I felt immersed in a new culture rather than visiting a culture that was primarily adapting to me. I felt like I was in Mexico when I was visiting Guanajuato, Queretaro, and Oaxaca. And a year later, these 3 still stick out in my mind as my favorites. All 3 are so charming, they stick out in my memory. Why did I drop Mérida from my top 3 or 5? Actually, it was rated number 1 when I first left Mexico. If you read my original post for the top places to retire in Mexico for cultural explorers, you know that Mérida was my number 1 pick just 6 months ago when I wrote the article. So what happened? This can best be explained with the following table of average highs for the day for each month of the year. In this table, you'll see all 4 of these cities: Mérida, Oaxaca, Guanajuato, and Queretaro. In a word, Mérida will be too hot for much of the year for many people, especially those approaching or at retirement. Why would Mérida be so much hotter than the other 3 places? Because Mérida is at sea level. We just happened to be in Mérida when the weather was near perfect. I was aware that it would get hotter, but that fact has become more real for me since leaving Mexico. Whereas Guanajuato, Oaxaca, and Queretaro are well above sea level, where the air is cooler year-round. Guanajuato is at 6,600 feet, or 2,000 meters above sea level. Oaxaca is 5,102 feet, or 1,555 meters above sea level, and Queretaro is at 5,970 feet, or 1,820 meters above sea level. You'll have to decide for yourself based upon the numbers in the table, but Oaxaca just seemed closer to my ideal temperature throughout the year. Oaxaca was basically in the mid-80s throughout the year, Fahrenheit, or the 27 to 30 Celsius throughout most of the year. And Guanajuato is just a little cooler than that, about 4 degrees cooler Fahrenheit, and a little less than that Celsius. And Queretaro was about the same as Guanajuato. So why Guanajuato, Queretaro, and Oaxaca? It has been almost a year since our Mexico tour, or really 6-7 months, and these three still stick out in my mind as favorites. Why did these three remain as my top 3 after a year? Also, how do I rank these top 3 and why? Okay, Oaxaca is number 1 in my mind now. There's a link here to my full report on Oaxaca, which is about 8 pages, so it's much more than this summary. Oaxaca is the number 1 place for me to retire in Mexico, and here's some of the reasons why I love it so much. Weather. Oaxaca is my favorite weather in Mexico. That's the main reason, but just as important really is the indigenous culture there. Oaxaca has a large indigenous population that still lives there, their culture of food, clothing, music, and art, and it really affects the entire community. It just really has a very interesting culture. Also, it's the surrounding mountains. Oaxaca is surrounded by beautiful mountains, and it's very green and lush and beautiful. The cost of living in Oaxaca is like $20 to $35 a day. Again, all the details about that are at the link provided. But so it has a slightly low cost of living than Queretaro or Guanajuato. Markets. The markets seem to be cleaner to me, a little bit more beautiful than we've seen in other parts of Mexico. And I would just say the overall feeling there, I just had a really good feeling about the people of Oaxaca. It just felt more like home to me for some reason. And all 3 of these places really just had a great feeling to them. So just Oaxaca just felt a little bit more like home to me. Okay, Guanajuato, number 2. Again, link here to the full report, 6 or 8 pages about from the time of my visit. You can click and read all about it, and there's videos for all 3 of these. Guanajuato is a university town. I've always loved university towns, and Guanajuato is a university town. It just feels intellectually expansive to me. The town is beaming with young, culturally aware people from all over the world. Second thing, the Cervantes Festival. The international festival honoring author Miguel Cervantes, author of Don Quixote, has opened the minds in this town and drawn international sophisticated tourists. Even the Queen of England and the Beatles have attended the festival here. Also the rolling hills. Guanajuato, the city was built in rolling hills, which created a natural network of human-only walkable trails around the city. So it's much like a charming pre-vehicle European village. It just has a very charming feel to it. And also there's a historical wealth here. The nearby Valencia silver mine produced 2/3 of the world's silver for more than 200 years. So the great wealth flowing through this town back to Madrid helped build some of the most interesting architecture in all of Mexico, and just a lot of money was spent. The theaters, the cathedral, just really a gorgeous place to walk around. Okay, number 3, Queretaro. Again, there's the full report on these 3 places. You can just come to the webpage, click the link below this YouTube video, and you'll see the links. So Querétaro is the Silicon Valley of Mexico. It feels more cosmopolitan to me than any other city in Mexico, except for maybe Mexico City. But it still has the walkable colonial era center, so it remains just as charming in that regard. It also has the most interesting and diverse nightlife of the three, because it's a little larger and has it's a more substantial city. Querétaro has the second highest per capita income in Mexico at 20,000 USD, and also has the second highest wine production in Mexico. Many international companies in the technology economy have decided to make Querétaro their home in Mexico, so there's a large international influence here. Querétaro has a large economically prosperous population chasing international goods and services, so you're likely to feel more connected to the world living here. And Querétaro is larger and slightly more spread out than Guanajuato or Oaxaca, but still walkable, so you are more likely to find a diverse set of interests here. Okay, final thoughts on this update and next steps for you. Picking where to retire internationally in the world is not that easy. It seems to be mostly about how you feel when you are somewhere. The data helps narrow your search, but you have to go see for yourself. If you decide to tour Mexico to pick your favorites, there's a link here. Here's my suggested touring routes for north, central, and southern Mexico. You can follow these routes and read the summaries of the areas and how to get from place to place. Are you sure you want to settle in one place? I've been traveling the world since 2007. That's been a total blast. Check out my free book, Fire Your Boss and Travel the World, link provided here. Maybe you could just do what I do, tour around the world. It's a nice way to live. Here are my favorite places in the world to visit and live cheap in paradise. That link's provided here also. And also there's a link here to my Retire Early Low Cost Living World Tour if you're curious about touring around the world and checking out all the low cost living areas. Okay, this is Dan of Vagabond Buddha. Thanks for stopping by. The world is your home. What time will you be home for dinner?